My name is Mokena Makeka. I am an architect and an urban planner and a very passionate advocate for climate smart cities. I am the convener of the adjudication panel for this cycle of the Coral Brick and Coverland Awards. As the convener, I bring together a number of esteemed people in the industry to come together and to review architectural projects and submissions, including academic work, and to determine to what extent are they deserving of national recognition, and does that recognition advance the production of architecture in a way that we can be globally proud. This cycle of the awards was complex because a lot of the projects were impacted by COVID, either due to the impact on the construction phasing, the design phasing, or from a cost perspective. So in many ways, we're seeing a re-emergence, if you will, of architectural production in a post-COVID economic environment. Another distinction with this particular cycle, I would argue, is the lack of public projects of great depth and diversity, and also a lack of diversity in terms of the participants themselves. I would love to see more participants of color. I'd love to see more women engaged. I'd love to see more young architects taking charge. And I think that is a comment, if you will, on the state of the industry, the difficulty for minority architects to have as deep an impact, but also a signal that we require much greater patronage and clients who are willing to invest in other voices in the production of architecture. What stood out for me in this adjudication process was perhaps not so much the architecture, but I would say my team, the adjudicators themselves. It was quite important to curate a cohort, if you will, of people who were genuinely interested in not only the success of the project, but also the care, if you will, and the role of the architect in the production of this architecture, but also that they brought their values to the table, but they didn't bring their biases. I think this is quite an important thing for me and an important part of the process, and it's something that stood out for me, and I've judged in many other processes where sometimes the bias of the judges overrides their ability to objectively look at the architectural work and say whether it is good or bad. So I think what stood out for me was an exceptionally mature and collegiate team of thinkers and people who are passionate about the production of architecture. I think architects need to do a number of things in order to do their work well. One is to understand that meeting the brief is not enough, and that in fact a good architect transcends the brief and transforms building into architecture. So that is something which we can all do better, and many of the submissions did do, but we can all do that a bit better. The second piece is that architects are a driver of knowledge in the built environment. So where we detail buildings, the challenges that we put forward can have a huge implication for how skills are increased in the industry. So I do look for buildings which are producing knowledge, not just producing shapes and putting things together, whether it's in the brickwork, whether it's in the roof coverings, whether it's in the way that a door hangs. So how do architects produce knowledge through the act of making architecture? The third piece, which I think is important, is the ways and means by which we take sustainability much more seriously. Some might argue that sustainability is merely about meeting some of the code qualifications when it comes to HVAC or glazing, etc. But I do think we need to think much more seriously about where do the materials come from that we specify when we make these buildings, the politics of the material. Are the communities affected by the sourcing of these materials or the way that buildings are actually built? We have to get to a point where we continuously raise the bar about how the act of making architecture is in fact a social and economic process. And when we understand it as an economic process with socio-political implications, we start to build differently. So I think one thing that we can all do better as architects is to be more aware and conscious of the implications of the design and not just the design in and of itself. My core message to all the architects who submitted their works is keep at it. Congratulations. The work that you have done has been thrilling to see. It's an incredible reflection of the state of the country, and it's an incredible contribution towards the future of this nation. I would urge all of you to continue to ask yourselves, to what degree is this building making the world a better place? To what degree does this particular project advance my own understanding of architecture, and indeed, does it become an educational tool for society? To what degree does the architecture allow me to imagine future and better works for myself? Am I inspiring myself through the production of these particular works? And last but not least, I did speak about architecture making the world a better place. But I do think that joy and beauty is an incredible and vital aspect of architecture. All too often, it is quite easy for architects to not talk about their building in terms of beauty, because that might be seen to be subjective or irrelevant. The reality is that we are the only discipline in the built environment that is trained in the aesthetics and the technical and the poetic properties of architecture. So if we do not take care of beauty, who shall? So I encourage all of us to not just merely meet the brief and to say it was cost efficient, etc., but to seize beauty as a duty of the architect, particularly in a country such as ours, with its vast and deep histories of inequality, pain, and the spatialization of inequality. It is up to our generation and future generations to make South Africa a beautiful place that is in communion with nature and with people.